So today we're going to talk about Legally Blonde. And the plot of Legally Blonde, for those of you who have not yet watched it, so there will be some spoilers, is that Elle Woods, who is the president of her sorority at a Southern California, Los Angeles university that seems a lot like USC.
It's called
But
CULA, but it's a fictional place.
CULA. And she is expecting to be proposed to by her boyfriend, who's a sort of big, handsome, hunky, dumb guy. And instead, he breaks up with her and he says, I'm going to have a political career. I'm going on to Harvard Law School and I need a wife who can really support my political career. And it's not you. And he's basically suggesting that she's really dumb and without any substance whatsoever. So how does she respond to that, Natalia?
Well, she is heartbroken because she'd been waiting to be proposed to. So she has that sort of like conventional feminine response. But then she's like, I guess I'm going to Harvard Law School too. And she basically puts her nose to the grindstone. And in, I think, this really kind of sweet and inspiring way, she's both kind of so clueless that she doesn't realize that a fashion major from this fictional university is like not exactly like the typical candidate, but she's also so smart and hardworking that she gets her 179 on her LSATs, and she's such a sort of unconventional candidate that she makes it in and then does very, very well there.
Yeah. And, it's a really sort of girl bossy thing because when she shows up, and apparently this was based on the original author, a woman named Amanda Brown, who wrote a novel about her experiences at Stanford Law School and about showing up at Stanford as a blonde and a super feminine person and going to like the Women's Center or something like that, and basically finding everybody is a super serious and a totally annoying dyke, basically. And that, of course, there's no lesbian themes in Legally Blonde, but Elle shows up and all the women are like super politically correct and gender non-binary and so on and so forth. It really sort of previews a lot of the anti-woke stuff that we're seeing today. And this is 2001, right?
Yeah.
And so, but Elle is also what I think is cool about it. And this is Reese Witherspoon. She is the ultimate in femininity. It's like she does not have a single object that cannot be zhuzhed up a little bit and made more feminine. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What are some of those objects, Natalia?
Well, the main object, not to objectify a dog, but is her dog Bruiser. So she carries around this little chihuahua in her rotating handbag collection, which are all these like, pink and shiny handbags, and everything she wears is like glittery or sparkly, high heels. She walks the way you would imagine a Barbie doll walking if she actually walked. She always has like big glam hair, kind of like Christy Nome hair, but 2001, and very, very blonde. She wears these little fascinator hats. I mean, it's over the top.
Way over the top. And yet you start to really cheer for her because all these super serious women start bullying her.
Right.
And there's this, big moment where they say, she overhears them saying that there's a party happening. And she's like, oh, there's a party. I love parties. And they really don't want her to come. But instead they say, oh, well, it's a costume party. And so she shows up dressed like a Playboy bunny. And that is a real pivot in the film because it's one of those moments where any one of us would say, oh my God, I would be completely humiliated by this.
Right.
And instead, she's kind of like Scarlett O'Hara in the red dress. She just takes it on and marches through this party dressed in her bunny outfit. Mm-hmm. And that's the pivot. And finally, she starts being taken seriously because she starts to figure out how to mesh her femininity with her intellectual side, right?
Right. And I think one of the things that's interesting is like the kind of foils of the other kind of women that she's like up against there and who are her tormentors. So there's definitely like, there are no lesbian themes in this movie, but like one of the figures who is her counterpart in many ways is this minor character who's like, yeah, I have like a master's in feminist studies from UC Berkeley. And, she's like clearly supposed to embody this like over the top, like kind of like left wing lesbian character. And so there's her, and she just like hates this over the top femininity. And then I think there's also this interesting East Coast, West Coast thing going. And like her ex-boyfriend Warner's new love interest, who's supposed to be wife material, isn't just like a little arm candy political wife. She's like a serious young woman who's also at Harvard Law School, who wears these like turtlenecks, played by Selma Blair, and who went to presumably like Choate or somewhere like that. So there's those kind of like serious women who she's up against too. But sorry, what's the other thing that you asked me? Why are we rooting for her?
Oh yeah, why do we start rooting for her? Because I was like rooting for her. I was just like, you go, girl. I mean, pulling off that Playboy bunny outfit at a Harvard Law School party, including we knew. She doesn't know, but we know, the viewers know that it's a trap.
Oh, right, exactly. It's very clear. Well, you're rooting for her because these other women are such bitches. Like, they're so judgmental. They're so rude. They're the mean girl bullies. And I think there's also this kind of like interesting inversion that's happening that's like very unsubtle, but like Reese Witherspoon is usually her character, Elle Woods, is usually who you would think of as being the kind of queen bee mean girl. She's the president of her sorority. She's like this perfect blonde. Like she's supposed to be the intimidating one that's like, circling fat on the girls, on the Rush girls' bodies and et cetera. And instead, she's this like the side of her that comes out is, yes, a little bit guileless and like wide-eyed, but it's friendly and sweet and earnest and actually open to engaging with these other people. Well, these other people are these like horrible, judgmental monsters. So, yeah, I think that's kind of the way I felt about it.
So we're sort of circling around the piece that doesn't get talked about as much, which is why this is set at Harvard University. And there's one simple answer for that, which is that Stanford and UCLA refused to let the filmmakers use their names.
Mhm.
And so they set it at Harvard. It's kind of interesting that Harvard said yes, and I couldn't find any details on that. Um, but why is Harvard the place that is perfect for this to happen?
Well, Harvard is just like it's this recognized brand, like
Yeah,
internationally, right? Like Harvard represents so many things to this was like a feature film shown at multiplexes everywhere. This was not
right,
like an independent film making this like sophisticated commentary on the Ivy League. And so
right.
I think that, everybody knows Harvard and it represents both incredibly elite like education, but also I think it's like, as I mentioned before, this perfect kind of East Coast counterpart to what she was. And I think that like I find it interesting. There are a couple scenes in there that I thought were fascinating where she comes from Bel Air and she's really wealthy. And a few things happen. One, she kind of says to Warner, like Warner Huntington the third or whatever his name is, her boyfriend, who's like, you're not wife material, and
Right.
I'm like from this elite background. And she's like, I'm from Bel Air. I live across the street from Aaron Spelling. And like the idea that like, yeah, she's very wealthy, maybe wealthier than he is, but that's kind of like new money and kind of trashy.
Right.
And then similarly, her own father is like, you're going to go to law school? Like law school is for like sad people who are angry about the world and want to fight all the time. You belong in like, being a decorator or something. And so that was like really interesting. And I thought Harvard just provides like the perfect known
Yep.
place where they don't have to do a lot of work to establish the context, but to kind of set up that contrast really well.
Yeah, I think that's right. And weirdly, I was at Harvard yesterday doing research. And one of the things that really struck me is that the lawns are incredibly lush and they have perfect mulched circles around the trees. And it just like screams old money. Whereas if you go to Stanford, for
Right.
example, it's really, really beautiful, but the entire climate is different. I mean,
Mhm.
you can't do that kind of thing there. But the other thing I was thinking about, and I just want to stick with this old money, new money theme for just a second, which is when she applies, and there's everything, they don't have video interviews at Harvard Law School. But when she applies, there are all of these old white men sitting around in suits. And let me just say, I don't think there's a single black or brown character in the movie, is there? Right.
No, well,
Okay.
the lesbian woman is kind of like ethnically indiscriminate. Like she might,
Right.
yeah. So I
Yeah,
don't
so
know.
the entire admissions committee, they're all of these stuffy white men in suits, and one of them is reading her CV and is like, she's a fashion major and she was president of her sorority. I mean, who is this person? And then the head of the admissions committee says, well, we do say we're interested in diversity. Right?
I know. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, this is not how most of us understand diversity. So here's a question. Um, this whole film series is about the American cultural fascination with Harvard. Um, why is it spoofing Harvard? Is it elevating Harvard? What does this movie do for the brand Harvard?
Well, I too was kind of surprised they allowed themselves to be in there because they don't exactly need, to pay for brand placement. Um, I think it's spoofing Harvard. I think it's
Yep.
spoofing that kind of older, elitist, exclusionary culture. Because remember, like they say, like, well, I guess we need to be a little more diverse, and this is their attempt at diversity, which it is real diversity in
Right.
one way.
Right.
And then she kills it. She gets the internship with the top professor. She's like absolutely crushing it in class. She connects with professors. Like she thrives there and she's able to do it. So, like, yeah, I would say it's spoofing sort of that older gatekeeping dimension of Harvard. I don't think I don't think anyone's not applying to Harvard because of this movie, but
Right.
I don't think it did that. The brand is pretty powerful.
Well, and then her quote unquote diversity turns out to win the day because she ends up in charge of a murder case. And actually, I'm not going to give this away, but there is something she knows that none of those Harvard people know, not the women, not the men, or anything
Mhm.
that helps her win the case. Having never been in a courtroom before in her life,
Mhm.
she has special knowledge that wins the case.
Yeah.
So Natalia, um, I just want to ask you one more question, and then we're gonna I'm gonna let you go, and I'm gonna let the audience go. Um, but you actually watched Legally Blonde 2, which you said is not as good. But how does Elle end up using her Harvard education, and does the Harvard brand make it into the next movie?
Yeah, honestly, the next one was so bad that I like couldn't even get all the way through it. But like she basically the storyline is that she becomes an animal rights activist and she's using that and she's using that her work to or her degree to fight for Bruiser and his friends. But Harvard is not as big of a part in there and it really like there's nothing really new. But that said, I did not watch as closely, so I don't want to
Right.
disappoint. Can I say one more thing though?
Oh,
Unless
yeah.
okay. So something it's funny. I as a woman who was in these elite institutions, I went to Stanford and Columbia in these same kind of years. Like it was so interesting to me to both feel so different from someone like Elle Woods. I'm like the opposite of LA's blonde sorority girl living across from Aaron Spelling. I'm from Boston, but on the other hand, like one of the things that her like special power comes from is not just the way she deploys her like physical femininity and her
Right.
attitude, but also like she takes seriously things like fashion. That murder case, which we won't give away, she's defending this like workout instructor who
Right.
has this whole workout empire. And she understands sort of the intricacies of the way that world works and like why this woman is not just some dumb gold digger, which is what everybody thinks about her. And I think like I really related to a lot of that because, like, as you know, I wrote this book about fitness culture. I do a lot of kind of pop culture stuff that there are certain gatekeepers and elitists who are like, oh, that's like silly lady stuff. And I really related to the way that she refused to kind of back
Yeah.
down from taking those kinds of that world seriously and the way it ultimately served her, even in the most kind of elite circles. So we love Elle Woods over here.
Yeah, I love Elle Woods too, and I kind of wish the entire Democratic Party had watched Legally Blonde in 2001 because I actually think there are some aspects of Trumpism that are being incubated there. One of which is Elle herself is not working class, but she is an outsider who is rich, who has the touch for working class people. So it's like at one point she feels so terrible and she's about to quit. So in order to make herself feel better, she goes and gets her nails done. And she makes friends with the woman who's doing her nails, who, has a horrible boyfriend. And she teaches that woman some feminine tricks to get her self-confidence back so that she can finally, of course, hook up with the UPS driver, who makes these wonderful entrances and says, "I have a package. It's a big package."
Yes, I know.
But Elle is like a soft version and a nice version of Donald Trump. She's a rich person who has not lost touch with working people and their concerns. And in fact, what you're telling me about Legally Blonde 2, which I will probably not watch, is on a certain level, Harvard rubs off on her, but she's the same person. She sort of uses Harvard as a platform, but she's the same person she always was, right?
Yeah, that's so interesting that that's how you read that whole nail salon scene. We should say, by the way, for those who have not seen Legally Blonde, that the manicurist is played by Jennifer Coolidge, who is always worth watching. Yeah, I read that. Similarly, that she stays in touch with this kind of, she had, like, what do they say about Donald Trump? He's a poor person's vision of a rich person, right? That, like, if I was rich, I would wear hot pink designer everything, right? Like that. Um, but I also saw that whole like continued site of the nail salon as so much like celebration of like women's spaces that are not the women's center or the kind of like feminist organizing space. Like there was so much awesome stuff that went on there among the women who were just sitting around chatting, getting their nails done. And I think given what we know about how the creator of Legally Blonde came to this and how excluded she felt from like, the so-called inclusive space of the Women's Center at Stanford, I think that that's like a really valuable statement.
Well, everyone we know in the Democratic Party, if you are in a decision-making position, you should watch this movie, More Elle Woods. And Natalia, thank you so much for hanging out and talking about this movie. Viewers/listeners, the next movie on our docket is going to be Love Story, with Ali MacGraw and what's his name? That funky blonde guy. Why are we forgetting him? Ali MacGraw is the only one I remember. She dies of cancer. Anyway, we're going to be doing Love Story, and Neil J. Young, mutual friend of Natalia's and mine, is going to do it with me. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Natalia, thanks so much for taking some time out of your morning.
Thank you. Ryan O'Neill. Thank you, Christine Bruno. You're right.
O'Neill.
Yes.
Well done. All right.
Awesome. Thanks, Claire. This was so fun. And thanks to people for tuning in. I've never done a Substack Live, so my debut.
I think we did pretty good, don't you?
Me too.
Okay,
Thank you.
hon.
Bye.